I loaned her the money to start her dream company, even selling my car to help her. But when those vacation photos appeared online, she wasn't with a client, she was with her boss. Before watching the video, please tell us in the comments, which country are you watching from? My name is Michael Grant, and I am 35 years old. I believed in hard work, loyalty, and partnership. But nothing prepares you for the moment love turns into a lie you funded yourself. When Claire told me she wanted to start her own marketing agency, I didn't hesitate for a second. She said it was her dream, and I wanted to be the man who helped make it real. I sold my car, dipped into my savings, even took a loan against my old house. Every dollar went into her vision. I told myself we were building something together, a legacy for both of us. At first, it felt right. We worked late nights in the small office downtown, fueled by takeout coffee and shared ambition. She smiled at me like I was her hero. I still remember how she grabbed my hand one night and said, "We're unstoppable, Michael." That sentence burned itself into my chest. But success changes people. Slowly, I saw the woman I loved become someone I barely recognized. She traded laughter for long calls, family dinners for business meetings, and comfort for luxury. I didn't complain. I was proud of her. Every win felt like our win. But as her confidence grew, so did the distance between us. When she hired Richard Hale, an older man with sharp suits and slick charm, I felt something shift. He was her mentor, her investor, her business guru. She spoke about him constantly, her eyes lighting up in ways they hadn't for me in months. Still, I trusted her. I believed that her dream was worth my doubt. The first real crack appeared one Friday night. She came home late, smelling of expensive cologne and champagne. When I asked where she'd been, she laughed and said, "Networking, honey. It's all part of the job." I smiled back, pretending that answer didn't sting. Weeks turned into months, and her success skyrocketed. The agency was featured in magazines, praised online, and celebrated by clients. But behind every win, I felt a growing emptiness. She no longer looked at me with gratitude, only impatience. I was the man who helped her start, but no longer the one she needed beside her. One night, I stood by the window, watching her pull into the driveway in a new car, one I hadn't even known she bought. She walked in, kissed my cheek without meeting my eyes, and went straight to bed. That's when I realized something had changed completely. The dream I built for her wasn't ours anymore. It was hers alone, and I was just the fool who funded it. The following months felt like living beside a stranger, wearing my wife's face. Claire's company grew fast. Her phone never stopped buzzing, and her smile belonged more to her clients than to me. She had become everything she dreamed of, confident, admired, successful. But every victory she celebrated pushed me further into the background. I watched her pour herself into work, and at first, I was proud. I wanted her to shine. But soon, I realized her light was no longer reaching me. She was traveling more often, short trips that turned into overnight stays. She said they were essential business meetings, but the sparkle in her eyes whenever Richard's name came up made me uneasy. I tried to tell myself it was all in my head. I didn't want to be that insecure husband who questioned his wife's every move. But doubt is like smoke. Once it creeps in, it fills every corner of your mind. She stopped asking me to join her at company events. She said it would be boring for me, but her Instagram told another story. Smiling with investors, posing beside Richard at rooftop bars, the kind of photos that looked less like business and more like desire dressed in success. One night, I decided to surprise her after one of those dinners. I drove to the restaurant, expecting to find them discussing numbers and clients. But when I walked in, they weren't talking about work. They were laughing, leaning close, his hand resting on hers. I froze, my chest tightened, my breath caught, and before either of them noticed me, I turned around and left. That drive home felt endless. Every mile was a question I couldn't answer. I told myself maybe I misunderstood, maybe it was just friendly. But deep down, I knew. Something sacred between us had cracked, and no amount of denial could fix it. When she came home later that night, her perfume still lingered from that dinner. She kissed me lightly on the cheek, acting as if everything was normal. I wanted to ask, to scream, to demand honesty. But instead, I smiled and said, "How was your meeting?" She smiled back and said, "Productive." That single word felt like a dagger wrapped in silk. After that, I stopped asking questions. I watched, I listened, and I waited. Because sometimes, silence gathers more truth than confrontation ever could. In the mirror, I barely recognized myself anymore. The man who once dreamed beside her had become her shadow, watching from the sidelines as she built a new world where I no longer fit. But even shadows can turn into storms when ignored too long. The nights grew longer, and the silence between us grew heavier. Claire worked later than ever, coming home long after midnight. She said clients demanded her time, that success required sacrifice, but I couldn't ignore the faint trace of men's cologne that didn't belong to me. Her excuses sounded perfect, too perfect, like lines rehearsed in front of a mirror. Her side of the bed stayed untouched most nights. I'd wake up to the glow of her phone, her face lit by messages she wouldn't let me see. I asked once who she was texting. She smiled thinly and said, "Just Richard. We're planning a pitch." That answer should have calmed me, but instead it set my pulse racing. Why did she have to talk business at 2 a.m.? Mornings felt colder too. She'd leave before dawn, claiming early meetings. I'd watch her car disappear down the street, wondering who she was rushing to see. My breakfast went cold most days, uneaten beside an empty chair. I'd stare at her coffee cup, lipstick still fresh on the rim, and ask myself when love had started tasting like regret. One evening, I checked our bank account out of habit. There were charges I didn't recognize, high-end restaurants, hotels in cities she never mentioned visiting, and luxury boutiques she swore she never had time to shop at. When I confronted her gently, she laughed. "Michael, it's all for business. You wouldn't understand how deals are made." Her words cut deeper than she knew. I stopped pressing. Instead, I started watching. I memorized her schedule, her calls, the tone of her voice when she spoke to him. She used to sound that way with me. Soft, alive, full of spark. Now, her warmth belonged somewhere else. At work, I couldn't focus. My mind drifted to her office, to the possibilities I didn't want to imagine. Every ring of my phone made my chest tighten. Every silence stretched longer than the last. I began sleeping on the couch, telling her I didn't want to disturb her when she came home late. She didn't object. That silence told me everything. One night, I woke up to the sound of her laughter, not in the room, but outside on the porch. I crept closer and saw her whispering on the phone, smiling like she used to smile at me. When she noticed me, she jumped, startled. "Just work," she stammered, locking her screen. That lie was her final mistake. I realized then that love wasn't dying between us. It was already dead. I just hadn't buried it yet. The next day, I decided to stop guessing and start knowing. The truth might break me, but ignorance was killing me slowly. What would you do if someone you loved betrayed you like this? Comment below. It was an ordinary afternoon when the truth finally found me. I was at work, half distracted, scrolling through my phone during lunch. A coworker leaned over and said, "Hey, isn't this your wife?" My stomach dropped before I even looked. On the screen was a social media post from Richard Hale, Claire's so-called mentor. The photo showed a beach, turquoise water behind them, and 2 champagne glasses raised to the sky. And there she was, Claire, smiling, her hair blowing in the wind, her hand resting on his shoulder. The caption said, "Business bonding. Hard work deserves a little sun." My vision blurred. I felt the ground tilt beneath me. My chest burned like someone had poured gasoline inside it. Business bonding? I scrolled through the rest. Dozens of photos, sunsets, candlelit dinners, her in a dress I'd never seen before, matching bracelets, hashtags like "Your Power Duo" and "New Beginnings." Every post sliced deeper. I wanted to deny it. Maybe it was an old photo, a company retreat, something innocent. But the timestamp said it all. Last weekend. The same weekend she told me she was in Denver for a corporate pitch. I checked my messages with her from those days. She sent me one photo of a hotel room desk with a laptop and files. A lie so neat it almost looked professional. I didn't speak for hours. My coworker apologized, realizing what he'd shown me. I just nodded and left the building. My hands trembled as I sat in my car, trying to breathe. Rage, humiliation, disbelief, they all fought for space inside me. How could she stand there, posting smiles while I sat home cooking dinner for her? I drove home in silence, staring at the road, but seeing her face. When I walked into our house, everything looked the same. Our photos, her shoes by the door, her scent lingering in the air. But now it all felt like a set, a stage built to hide betrayal. That evening, she called. Her voice was calm, casual. "Hey, babe, flight's delayed. I'll be home late." I stared at the phone, then whispered, "Take your time." She didn't notice the tone. She never noticed much anymore. After the call, I opened my laptop and started saving everything. The photos, the captions, the comments congratulating them on being a power couple. The proof sat on my screen, mocking me, daring me to act. For the first time, I didn't feel helpless. I felt something colder, determination. She wanted a partner for her success. She made me her foundation. Now, I was done holding her world up. She thought the photos would stay online forever, collecting likes. She didn't realize they'd just become the evidence that would destroy her perfect image. The betrayal was no longer a secret. It was public, and soon, so would be the consequences. After that day, something inside me shut off completely. I didn't confront her. I didn't scream or throw things or demand answers. I just went quiet. Because silence, I learned, is the sharpest weapon a betrayed man can hold. When Claire finally came home from her business trip, she walked through the door like nothing had happened. She kissed my cheek, dropped her suitcase, and said she was exhausted. I watched her, studying her every movement, the way her eyes avoided mine, the way she spoke too quickly. She didn't know I'd already seen everything. I asked her how Denver was. She smiled. Busy, but productive, she said, opening her laptop as if to prove it. I almost laughed. She had no idea I'd seen her sipping champagne on a beach in another country. The woman I loved had become a stranger wearing her face. I spent the next few days gathering everything. Screenshots of her posts, financial statements showing withdrawals, and business expenses labeled as client retreats. I traced every transaction that matched her lies. Each piece of evidence was a brick, and I was building something far stronger than revenge. I was building control. Claire, meanwhile, kept pretending. She talked about how proud she was of her agency, how Richard was helping her expand globally. She didn't notice that I stopped responding. She didn't notice how my eyes no longer softened when she entered a room. I was studying her like a criminal preparing a case. At night, she texted constantly, laughing under her breath, typing fast before turning her phone over. I didn't ask who it was. I didn't need to. Every secret she thought she was hiding was already in my hands. I started documenting everything quietly, every lie, every detail. Her credit card bills, business files, emails. When she left her laptop open one night, I transferred copies of her travel receipts and messages. I found one from Richard. Can't wait for our next conference. Same beach, same room. My jaw clenched, but I didn't break. I only smiled. She was planning another trip soon, another business event. That would be her last. I began preparing for the perfect moment, not to humiliate her in private, but to let her world crumble where she valued it most, in front of the people who once admired her. I stopped talking to her about anything personal. My silence started to bother her. She'd ask, "Michael, are you okay?" I'd nod and say, "Just tired." She believed it. Betrayers always do. They mistake calm for weakness. But I wasn't weak. I was ready. I wasn't the husband waiting for her love anymore. I was the man waiting for her mask to fall, and I would be there when it did. The day of her agency's quarterly investor meeting arrived, and Claire was glowing. She wore her power suit, the one that made her feel untouchable. She kissed me on the cheek that morning, whispering, "Wish me luck." I smiled and said, "You won't need it," because I already knew luck had nothing to do with what was coming. I had spent weeks preparing for that day. Every lie, every receipt, every stolen dollar disguised as business travel was neatly printed in a folder. I wasn't going to shout or embarrass her in private. No, I wanted the truth to echo in the same room where she built her empire of deception. When I arrived, the investors were already seated, and Claire stood confidently at the front, presenting charts and graphs about her agency's growth. Richard sat beside her, smirking like a man who thought he'd won twice, in business and in love. They didn't even notice me at first. When they finally did, their faces shifted, surprise and confusion. I waited until she finished her speech. Then I stood up slowly. "Before we continue," I said, "I think everyone here deserves to see how this success was really funded." I walked to the front, placed the folder on the table, and slid it toward the lead investor. The room went silent. Papers rustled. Eyes widened. The investor frowned, scanning the documents. Flight receipts, hotel bookings, personal purchases charged to the company card. "Mrs. Grant," he said slowly, "would you care to explain why company funds were used for a private vacation?" Claire's confidence cracked. She stuttered, her hands trembling. That was part of a client retreat." I stepped forward. "Funny," I said calmly, "because the only client there was your boss." I projected one of the vacation photos onto the presentation screen, her and Richard on the beach, holding hands under a sunset. The silence that followed felt heavier than thunder. Richard stood up, his face pale. "This is ridiculous," but no one was listening. The investors whispered among themselves, some shaking their heads, others closing their notebooks. The lead investor looked at her coldly. "We don't fund fraud," he said. "You're finished here." Claire turned toward me, eyes wide, voice cracking. "Michael, please." But I just looked at her. "No," I said softly. "Please is for people who tell the truth." I walked out before the meeting ended. Behind me, I heard her crying, her voice breaking as her perfect world collapsed. The same world I once built with my own hands. Outside, I took a deep breath. The air felt cleaner, lighter. I didn't smile, but I didn't feel pain either. For the first time in years, I was free, not just from her, but from the illusion of the life we shared. If you were in my place, would you forgive or walk away? Tell me in comments. The weeks after that meeting felt strangely quiet. The storm had passed, but its echoes lingered in every corner of my life. Claire moved out of our house without a word. I didn't stop her. The woman who once filled my world with laughter now carried her silence like a punishment she couldn't escape. The agency she built collapsed almost overnight. Investors pulled out, clients disappeared, and Richard? He vanished the moment the fallout began. I heard through a mutual friend that he'd moved to another city, leaving her to face the wreckage alone. Karma didn't need my help. It worked faster than I ever could. For a while, I expected to feel joy. Revenge, after all, was complete. But what I felt instead was peace and exhaustion. Years of trying to save something that was never real had drained me. Now, all that energy was finally mine again. I used it to rebuild, quietly and carefully. I started jogging every morning before sunrise. At first, it was just to clear my head. But soon it became a ritual, a reminder that I was still moving forward. I reconnected with old friends I had lost touch with while chasing her dreams. They welcomed me back without judgment. I realized how much life I'd put on pause for a woman who couldn't even stay faithful. One afternoon, as I packed away the last of her belongings, I found a framed photo of us from years ago. Before the lies, before the company, before everything fell apart, I stared at it for a long time. We looked happy, but I could see it now. I was the only one looking at her. She was already looking past me, toward a future that never included me. I placed the photo face down in the box and walked away. Claire reached out a few times. Calls, texts, voicemails filled with apologies and promises that she could make it right. I didn't respond. You can't rebuild trust from ashes. She wanted forgiveness, but she never wanted change. Instead of answering her, I invested my time in something new, a small business of my own. Nothing fancy, just honest work, built from scratch. Every milestone reminded me that I didn't need her approval to succeed. I could stand on my own, stronger than before. By the third month, I realized something powerful. Revenge wasn't about breaking her. It was about fixing myself. Her downfall wasn't my victory. My peace was. The man who once gave up everything for love had finally learned the truth. When someone takes your loyalty for weakness, walking away becomes the greatest form of strength. And I walked, not away from her, but toward myself. Months passed before I saw her again. I was sitting in a cafe downtown, sipping my coffee, when the door opened and Claire walked in. She looked smaller somehow, the confidence that once defined her replaced by something fragile. She froze when she saw me, hesitated for a moment, then slowly approached my table. "Michael," she said softly, "you look good." Her voice trembled. I nodded. "I am," I replied simply. She smiled faintly, as if hoping that meant there was still a door open between us. There wasn't. That door had closed the day she chose betrayal over honesty. She sat down without asking, her hands shaking as she stirred her coffee. "I lost everything," she whispered. "The company, the investors, Richard, he's gone." I stayed silent. I didn't feel anger anymore, just a quiet distance that words couldn't cross. She looked at me, her eyes wet. "You were the only one who truly believed in me," she said, "and I ruined that." I took a slow breath and said, "You didn't ruin me, Claire. You only ruined yourself." For the first time, she didn't try to defend herself. She just nodded, wiping her tears. "I wish I could undo it," she whispered. I looked at her, the woman I once sacrificed everything for, and realized I no longer felt love or hate, just closure. We talked for a few minutes more, mostly about the past, the memories that once felt sweet, but now tasted bitter. She asked if I could ever forgive her. I looked her in the eyes and said, "Forgiveness isn't something I owe you. It's something I found for myself." She didn't understand at first, but that was okay. Not everything needed to be explained. When she left the cafe, I watched her walk away, slow, unsure, broken. And for the first time, I didn't feel like a victim. I felt free. Her absence wasn't a wound anymore. It was space. Space I could finally fill with peace, purpose, and self-respect. That evening, I drove to the coast, parked near the water, and sat there watching the sun dip below the horizon. The same kind of sunset that had once framed her betrayal now marked my redemption. I realized the past no longer had power over me. The pain had done its job. It taught me how to rebuild. Some people chase revenge to destroy others. I learned that real revenge is rebuilding yourself so completely that their memory can't touch you. And that's exactly what I did. This is how my wife betrayed me. Should I forgive or move on? Tell me in comments. If this story reminded you of your own strength, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Your support helps these stories reach those who need to hear them most.